What if I told you when you read the word Israel in your Bible that you're reading it wrong? What if the greatest misunderstanding of modern Christianity comes down to a single word? And what if that confusion leads to multiple false doctrines that are shaping millions of people who claim to be Christians' lives around the world today? Here's a fact that might shock you. The word Israel in the Bible never means Jews. Not once. Not ever. So by the end of this video, you'll understand this word rightly. Hi, I'm Vanessa. Welcome to Wholeheartedness, where I lovingly challenge us to live out our faith biblically in all things. This video is a part of my mini-series, The Bible in Israel. Let me ask you a question. When you read the word Israel in your Bible, what comes to mind? Be honest. Because if you're like most Christians, you probably think of Jews or even the modern state of Israel. But I want to challenge you. What if that is totally wrong? This interpretation creates so many problems. There are contradictions, again, hidden in plain sight. Because if that's the case, if the word Israel and Jew are synonymous and they mean the same thing, then how come most Israelites in the Old Testament were not Jews? And why were all Old Testament biblical Israelites not a part of Judaism? Because if we're supposed to see the biblical Israelites collectively as Jews, then why, after they split into two kingdoms, does the Bible refer to those in the northern tribes as Israelites, while only calling those in the southern tribe Judeans or Jews? If you're starting to catch my wave, then you're coming to see that this don't make no sense. And the confusion that has come from misinterpreting these words runs so deep. It affects how Christians view current day events, how they read prophecy, and it even affects what they choose to support in modern political situations. What if the Bible was crystal clear on who Israel is, if we were to just interpret these words correctly? So let's go back to the beginning and get this straight once and for all. So biblical Israel in the Old Testament was started with the 12 sons of Jacob, who then became the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. So there was Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Notice that Judah was only one of the sons and that he wasn't the father of all of the tribes. Again, as I've said in many of my videos, Jews only derive from one of the tribes, which is the tribe of Judah, and eventually the kingdom of Judah. And something that might really shock a lot of Christians is that all of the biblical Israelites in the Old Testament followed what scholars call today Yahwism, not Judaism. Yahwism was the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel, where Judaism, the religion as we know it today, didn't exist during most of the Old Testament times. And it was also not the only religion that came from Yahwism. So just think about that for a moment. Moses wasn't Jewish. He was a Yahwist. David wasn't Jewish. He was a Yahwist. Even Solomon was not Jewish. He too was a Yahwist. They all worshipped Yahweh. And Judaism, which is a religion, wasn't a thing yet. And then after Solomon's death, biblical Israel split into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom of Israel, which encompassed 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom of Judah, which encompassed Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. But pay attention to this. The northern 10 tribes kept the name Israel, while the southern kingdom was named Judah. So they were two different nations with different kings, different capitals, and they often were at war with each other. And this is where the terminology becomes fascinating and confusing. The term Jew comes from the word Yehudi, which literally means of Judah. It was purely a geographical descriptor. So it essentially just described the people who lived in Judah. So the people who lived in Judea at that time were called by outsiders Jews. So at that time, it literally had nothing to do with religion. Again, Judaism wasn't around yet. So when someone was called a Jew in ancient times, it simply meant they were from the southern tribe of Judah. It's like saying someone who lives in Italy is Italian, or someone who lives in Texas even is a Texan. And here's where things get really interesting. Judaism as a religion developed later from the southern kingdom of Judah. And when Judaism came about, the term Jew started to take on a religious connotation, and those who followed Judaism began to adopt the term for themselves. Meanwhile, the other 10 tribes who were up in the northern kingdom of Israel were never considered Jews. Not once are they ever referred to as Jews in the Bible. They were always identified as Israelites, they just weren't identified as Jews. And one of the greatest examples I love to use is the Samaritans, because we see them in the Bible and we see them today. And in the Bible, they weren't considered Jews. And today, they still do not consider themselves Jews. They reject that title because one, they were not from Judea, and two, they don't follow Judaism. That means for most of biblical history, you could be an Israelite and not be a Jew, and that you could worship Yahweh without practicing Judaism. Now we can start to see the massive problems beginning to emerge from under the surface of this misunderstanding. And because there are so many modern biblical scholars who make this misinterpretation, it only beats this misinterpretation deeper into the minds of Christians around the world. And so when Christians today read the word Israel in the Bible and they think Jews, they are collapsing thousands of years of historical and biblical context into a one-dimensional, insufficient meaning. And this misinterpretation creates so much confusion in regard to biblical prophecies in particular. Because when the Bible talks about all Israel being saved or all Israel being restored, it's not talking about those who follow Judaism, nor is it ever referring to the modern state of Israel. But Christian Zionists and dispensationalists, they believe it is, but their own interpretation contradicts itself, because as I've clarified many times, they believe that the genetic descendants of Abraham are the ones to whom the promises to Abraham are for. So their interpretation is excluding most of the people who those promises they say would refer to. So an accurate restoration based on their own interpretation would be a coming together again of all of the tribes of Israel, including the lost tribes, not just the tribe of Judah or the tribes that were a part of the kingdom of Judah. And this is where it gets so dangerous. Because many of these Christians believe that the modern state of Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, they choose to give their political support to the modern state of Israel no matter what it does, all because they believe that Jews in the Bible equals biblical Israel. But it's just not biblical. And all of their opinions on the modern state of Israel are founded 100% on this one word, misinterpretation. And this is where we must be willing to challenge ourselves. Because if the way we're interpreting this simple word, these two words really, doesn't align with history, it doesn't align with the way the Bible uses the word, then are we going to continue to cling on with a death grip to a misunderstanding that cannot be supported by the Bible itself? Or are we going to follow God in His Word and the way He intended us to understand it? Either we're going to be followers of God at all costs, even if it means going against what is ingrained in us, and even if it means it puts us at odds with our community. Or we're going to be people who are more allegiant to ideas that are unfounded biblically than we are to God Himself. Because the New Testament is very clear about who Israel is. And if you haven't checked out my video on that, then I'll link that at the end of this video. So in the end, what does this all mean? It means that Christians are taking two words, Israel and Jew, and they're making them synonymous when they're not. And it's this one error that has caused so much confusion, has created so many false doctrines, and it impacts the way people read the Bible as a whole. And sadly, it even impacts the way they live their life and view the world. So I ask you that when you see Israel in the Bible, remember that its meaning is dependent on its context, but that Israel never means Jews. It can mean Jacob, the one who was renamed Israel. Or it could be referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. Or it can mean the northern kingdom specifically. Or it could be pointing to something far greater than all of those things combined. Which again, I'll have that video pop up here in just a moment if you want to watch that. But please understand this. If you take anything else away from anything I ever share, this is one of the most important things. That Israel in the Bible never means Jews, certainly not in the way we understand it today. The word Israel in the Bible is so much richer and so much more complex than what you've been led to believe. But I really pray that this helps you read your Bible better, to grasp the fullness, the overarching big story that God has weaved together for us in His Bible, and that we would come to understand His Word as He has intended for us to understand it. And like I said, you can watch this video here if you want to learn more about who biblical Israel is today. But I hope you would share this video with whoever you think might need to hear it. And I just really appreciate you being here. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time.